Hello.
Hello.
This is Shit You Didn't Know. I'm Corey,
I'm Logan.
and we're going to tell you some shit you didn't know. So, the beer this week is Independence Harbor Amber Ale. Also from Aldi. Pretty good, wouldn't you say?
Another one from Aldi.
Yeah. I don't know. There seems to be a connection.
It doesn't help that we pretty much buy all our beer for this from Aldi, but
Sponsor us, Aldi. Please. Anyway.
I mean, of all sponsors, that would be the one I would feel less bad about.
Right, even though they're German.
Insert subtle nip slip.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And not to joke. So, so last episode was a bit of a bummer. This one won't be. I think this one's a little funnier. All right.
As funny as the Dave one, because that was hilarious. Nothing's funnier than a cult that is rated by the ATF.
It's not a person you feel less sorry for than David Koresh. So, all right. November 24th, 1859, Charles Darwin, a British naturalist, geologist, and biologist, published On the Origin of Species, a book written for ordinary citizens to explain Darwin's theory of evolution, and the scientific theory that populations evolve over the course of generations through a process of natural selection. Darwin explained that humans originally evolved over millions of years into what we are now, from lower species. There was a mixed reaction throughout the Western world about Darwin's claims. There was acceptance among the scientific community in Germany, France, Great Britain, and the United States, but there was a lot of hostility as well. Many found the concept of a creation of human life as an indifferent natural process hard to accept. There was a lot of opposition in the rural United States. Shocking, I know, right?
Right.
Yeah. That's, you know what, though? They've turned it around. They're open now. Open minds, open hearts.
As long as it fits in the Bible.
Right. So, as long as they're white. Many religious leaders found Darwin's ideas to be dangerous, but others accepted that the Bible could be morally, if not literally, true. Religious scholars who accepted Darwin's findings were called modernists. Those that rejected it and thought the Bible was literal were called fundamentalists.
Oh, you're right. This is going to be a fun one.
Yeah, exactly.
All I got to say, though, since we're on church, and sounds like a very religious one, or anti-religion, depending on how we go with this.
That's up to the listener. I really don't know if it's pro or anti-religion. I think it's a little...
But a little just of, religion.
Right.
Anyway, if the church wouldn't have killed, if you weren't someone the church would have killed 400 years ago, are you really living? That's all I gotta, that's all I'm thinking about.
It's a good point. They thought Galileo was a rebel. I mean, he's not a rebel. Not really. So the fundamentalists were powerful in the southern United States. Again, so much has changed. In 1909, a group of southern religious leaders decided to publish a series of pamphlets entitled The Fundamentals, in which they affirmed their belief in a set of core tenets of Christianity, among them the infallibility and literal translation of the Bible. In 1919, a minister named Dr. William Bell Riley started the World Christian Fundamentals Association. This is where the modern Christian fundamentalists come from, explicitly. Right, so this is the beginning. One of the many reasons that Southerners and people in the Midwest were unhappy with evolution and modernism was that the economic boom of the 1920s had passed them by. Mechanization had made farm labor cheaper and more efficient. The end of World War I led to a decrease in European demand for American farm products, and this led to a price drop in the farmers' products.
The Lord be smiting us.
No, isn't it? So the economy was good for urban America, but disaster for rural America.
Yep.
So isn't this so topical right now?
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
it really is. Especially with Trump's entire the people he goes for.
Right.
His entire audience is the exact opposite of almost everyone else.
They're the stereotype that Europeans have of Americans in literal form.
Yep.
But it's that way with a lot of it. Trump is not any different than a lot of people have been throughout history.
No.
So, I think that the years are going to take care of Donald Trump. It's not going to be very good.
Oh, look what the years did to Obama and Bush.
Well, I'm just talking about his historical legacy and the legacy
yeah.
of the people who voted
But I mean,
for him.
if it also degrades his years by a decent amount, that's even better. But look. Have you seen what Bill Clinton looks like recently?
Yeah, he's melting. Like, I think you said that in a prior podcast that he's molting. And it's kind of true, but he went on a vegan diet, so that makes sense. He's still going to outlive Trump by...
Oh, yeah, but my whole thing
leaps and
is
bounds.
everyone's like, look at what the stress does to a president. And Obama before and after. Well, Clinton's been out of the office for years. You know why? He's been stuck with Hillary for the past... for the rest of it. It's not the White House, it's the wife.
Oh, my God. She lost a gimme election. Let's give her a break. She really did. Even she's like, I'm going to go home. I'm done. I'm done. So, on top of all this, the 20s also saw cultural changes that took rural America by surprise. So, tied into the theme, immigrants were pouring in from Eastern Europe and Italy, and most were not Protestant or English-speaking, so the rural communities felt threatened by the changing religious and demographic makeup of the United States. Oh my God, so topical. Prohibition was ignored in the cities. There were hundreds of speakeasies and brothels. White city dwellers were dancing to the sounds of Negro jazz. Cars, which had been rare before World War I, were now everywhere. There were big city gangsters, girls wearing short skirts, extravagant spending, and more people getting divorced. To rural America, there was a decay in America's morals.
The beginning of the world's greatest generation.
Right. So, it's just amazing how much things didn't change in the last 100 years. This is 100 years ago. And it's not that different.
Well, it's because the people who started it have pretty much put that into their generations. And
Well,
we're kind of stuck in a perpetual loop.
It's a
at this
power
point.
struggle between urban and rural America.
Well, and it's all,
And the suburbs are in the middle.
but it's all pretty much the whole ideas passed down from generation by generation.
Right.
It's the same as racism. A lot of people now are racist just because they listen to their mom, listen to their grandpa, like all of that, and it just
Yeah. Stop doing that.
Stop
Stop doing that.
For real. But a lot of the rural
Make your own opinion.
A lot of the rural ideas and how
Right.
you're supposed to live as being urban, they haven't changed. It's all been the same people.
Yeah, that could be a topic for an entirely different podcast too. And I think I'm going to go into it at some point.
Right
But
on.
no, that's all correct. So in spite of all this, in spite of all the moral outrage in the South, most science books had included Darwin's theory, even in the South. But many Southern parents began to object to their children going to a school that was publicly funded, yet was teaching them about Darwin's theory. In 1923 alone, there were anti-evolution bills introduced in 6 states, but none went anywhere. But then on March 25th, 1925, the state of Tennessee passed the Butler Act, introduced by John W. Butler, a Tennessee farmer and head of the Christian Fundamentals Association. Butler stated, "I didn't know anything about evolution. I'd read it in the papers that boys and girls were coming home from school and telling their parents that the Bible was nonsense." So they were listening.
Oh, it's just like my stepmom. She was a science teacher. Science and maybe history. But anyway, albeit it was middle school in several points in Texas. But to this day, she still firmly believes in creationism.
That is just, oh my God, that's so disheartening.
And I just find someone who is supposed to teach science believing in creationism as I have
It's like somebody who thinks
Funny.
2 + 2 = 5 wants to be the math teacher. Do you know algebra? I don't believe in it. I want to be the math teacher.
Right.
Jeez. You know who invented algebra? Muslims. It's true. So, the bill was passed in the Tennessee House by a vote of 71 to 5, but the State House didn't think that the Senate would pass it, and most thought the law was absurd, but they were afraid of the consequences if their constituents found out they had opposed it. Then the Senate passed the Butler Act along the same line of reasoning and thought that Governor Austin Peay would veto it. But Governor Peay needed funding for educational and transportation reforms throughout the state, so he signed it as a compromise. Right. So Governor Peay thought the law was... Well, okay, so Governor Peay was actually a progressive governor.
Yep.
And he wanted to bring reform. He wanted to bring high schools to rural areas. He wanted to build transportation. He wanted everyone to go to school. But in order to do that, he had to sign this bill to get that funding. So that's why he did it. And away we go. So Governor Peay thought the law was ridiculous and thought it would never be enforced. The law specifically stated, "It shall be unlawful for any teacher in any of the universities or public schools of the state of Tennessee, which are supported in whole or in part by the public school funds of the state, to teach any theory that denies the story of the divine creation of man as taught in the Bible, and to reach instead that man has descended from a lower order of animals." So, science. Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah, exactly.
Insert Bill Nye theme song. What was his name?
Bill Nye.
No, what was the governor's name or whatever?
Austin Peay.
Austin Peay.
Austin Peay. I know.
Jeez.
Yeah. So it stated that any teacher that was caught doing this would be found guilty of a misdemeanor and issued a fine between $100 and $500. Tennessee was the first state to have a law like this, but it didn't get national attention. But it did get the attention of the ACLU. And they announced in national newspapers that they would defend any teacher in Tennessee who was prosecuted under the law. This announcement got the attention of a man in Dayton, Tennessee named George Rappleyea. Rappleyea. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. That's pretty hard.
Yeah.
Rappleyea. Who is... We're going to name him Georgie R. That's what we're going to do. All right. Tennessee... So... Georgie R., who was the owner of the local coal and iron company in Dayton, had an idea. He gathered himself, the superintendent of public schools, Walter White. Yeah, Walter White. So they made some blue meth together.
For some reason, just because it's Halloween, I just have an image spinning in my head of Walter White going, "Hi, Georgie," just like, but in the voice that he does, just like really deep and
You're
almost mad.
goddamn right.
Right? Heisenberg.
You gonna buy it or not?
Don't float up.
98% pure. So there was Georgie R. and Walter White and local attorney Sue Hicks. They had a meeting at Robinson's drugstore. Georgie R. thought that the Butler Act was a bad law and wanted it repealed, and thought that Dayton should be a good place to set up a test case for the ACLU. The three didn't agree on their religious views, but they did agree that doing this would bring in much wanted business and attention to the town. Then the 24-year-old football coach and science teacher John Scopes was approached and was asked to admit to teaching evolution and have himself arrested. Scopes, who loved science, also thought the Butler Act was an idiotic law. He said that since Tennessee had a science book that included Darwin's theory, teachers in Tennessee could be prosecuted for simply doing their jobs.
Yep.
Scopes agreed to be the defendant and assumed that it would mostly be a local matter and figured that he could go back to Kentucky for the summer and sell cars to raise money for graduate school.
Oh. Rest in peace, savings. Your business in Kentucky just got shot.
Yeah, I know. It's just amazing. And not really much has changed with payment of teachers. Like, the guy had to still go back home and sell used cars to pay for graduate school.
No,
because couldn't afford it.
My sister had a teacher in, I think, middle school. During the summer, you would find him working at the nursery at Home Depot.
Yeah, that's fucking. Oh my god. Yeah, that's ridiculous. But it would not remain a local issue. Once the ACLU had Scopes as a willing client, the anti-evolution movement's leader, William Jennings Bryan, noticed. William Jennings Bryan was a former congressman from Nebraska, a former Secretary of State under Woodrow Wilson, and a three-time presidential candidate for the Democratic Party in 1896, 1900, and 1908, losing to William McKinley twice and William Howard Taft once. So he's the Buffalo Bills of presidential candidates, in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, he keeps losing. On May 13th, Bryan announced that he would represent the World Christian Fundamentals Association at the trial, proclaiming, "We cannot afford to have a system of education that destroys the religious faith of our children. There are over 5,000 scientists in this country, and half of them are atheists. Are we going to allow them to run our schools?"
Every time you do a religious voice, it's just so, like, evangelical.
Thank you.
Well, the evangelical I've seen is always Texan, so I wouldn't take that as a compliment.
You shouldn't.
Thou shalt be burned in hell.
Yeah. So Bryan felt that the country needed more heart, not more brains and intellect. He'd love it right now.
Right.
He really would. He also objected to the theory of evolution being used to support political economic conservatism. Yeah, that kind of threw me for a loop too. Mm-hmm. He feared that survival of the fittest would be used to roll back government reforms and regulations. So it's weird. He was a progressive, but he was religious. So he thought that if the Darwinian theory would be passed, as a viable theory through economics, that it would cause a lot of detriment to the poor and less privileged in society.
Interesting.
Yeah, so he actually read the Bible. Isn't that interesting?
Right.
Weird. So
yeah, back then a lot more people did that.
Yeah. Then came another addition to the event. Clarence Darrow volunteered his services as John Scopes' defense attorney. At 68, he was the most famous trial lawyer of all time. Darrow was a champion for civil liberties, as well as an open agnostic. He saw the Butler Act as an attack on freedom of speech, modernity, and religious freedom. At first, the ACLU was reluctant to have Darrow represent Scopes, and felt that he would draw too much attention to the religious aspect of the case. The ACLU saw this as a strictly free speech issue, not a religious one. Yeah. Darrow wanted to launch an attack on fundamentalism and invite world-renowned scientists to Dayton to testify about evolution and explain it as a valuable scientific theory. He had three goals. First, educate the judge and jury about Darwin's theory. Second, demonstrate that science and religion were not incompatible. Third, they would address the issue of academic freedom and emphasize the need for teachers to be allowed to teach unfettered by legislation. Now that Bryan and Darrow were involved, the case was national news, and the town began to prepare. Reporters came from all over the world. Hollywood film studios sent cameramen to make newsreels of the trial. The courthouse was given a new coat of paint. Extra spittoons were ordered, and WGN hooked up.
God damn it! You try to slip that one past, but no.
Extra spittoons. It is Tennessee in the 20s, so imagine.
I know, but I could just see fucking Clint Eastwood walking in there saying, "Right."
Just
bar door swinging.
I did try to sneak that in. That's good.
Someone walk in, everyone just like stops, stares, like every fucking Western.
No, it's right? Just, I bet back then too, it's just everyone was dipping snuff. It's everyone. It's just sitting down in the courthouse. See, Mr. Travis here is represented for the court. Bing!
Right? You always have to have that ping.
It's just, so, yeah. It's spittoons. So WGN hooked up wire through the town and installed microphones in the courthouse. This would be the first trial to ever be broadcast on the radio. And do you think Harry Carey was still announcing it? Because I do.
Oh my gosh.
And now they're bringing in the extra spittoons. Holy cow.
Right. Ba-ting.
There were also monkey-related decor throughout the town. Robinson's drugstore sold monkey fizz at the soda fountain. Local stores sold monkey plush toys. The butcher shop... Crass commercialism at its best. The butcher shop put up a sign saying, "We handle all kinds of meat except monkey."
See, it truly is like now. Try to make a valid argument, a valid reasoning,
Right.
and
Yep.
all of society is like, oh guys, let's water it down with good old commercialism.
Yeah.
Truly American. way
Imagine
of
someone
living.
saying that in a lisp. We handle all kinds of meat except monkey. That was a weird time. I did not like that. All right, moving on. A gorilla was brought into the town so everyone could look at it. And, this is my favorite part, a chimpanzee wearing a three-piece suit named Joe Mindy greeted people at the door of Robinson's drugstore. And I gotta tell you, he's adorable. He's wearing a top hat. He's wearing a three-piece suit. He has a cane.
Dude, if I was a dad back then, even if I believed in evolution or creationism, I would be walking past all those, like past the gorilla, to my son and go, "He's your brother." Just make jokes like that. Like,
Yeah, my dad did that to me with the orangutans.
it's amazing. Your dad made a ginger joke.
Oh yeah, for anyone knowing, I'm a redhead. Just to dispel that rumor. So,
Yeah.
where's
But
the
also-
sunblock, by the way?
Right, but also to confirm a stereotype that they have no goddamn souls.
And they're quick to anger and have problems with alcohol.
That's do we all.
But you know what? That may just be being Irish. So, fundamentalists began pouring into Dayton to bear witness to the arrival of their hero, William Jennings Bryan, who had arrived in preparation for the trial. A banquet was held in his honor that night, and at the event, Bryan told the audience, "This trial uncovers an attack which for a generation has been made more or less secretly upon revealed religion, that is, the Christian religion. If evolution wins, Christianity goes." 2 days later, Darrow arrived. There's no one to greet him. Yeah, true to form, right? So, July 12, 1925 was the first day of the trial. Judge John Ralston started the day off with a prayer, which the defense saw as in bad taste, which, yeah.
Yep.
The courthouse in Dayton could seat 700 people, and it was packed, with an additional 300 people standing in the back. It was over 90 degrees that day, and the courtroom had no fans. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So imagine the BO and ball sweat in that fucking room, along with the spittoons. Smell like cheese in here?
Man.
Don't bring no Limburger cheese in here.
Right. See, even God doesn't want this to proceed. He's bequeathing us upon hell in this courtroom. Smell that? That is sulfur. No, Jeff, that's eggs. That's eggs and nuts. It's sulfur. The hell, Satan be upon us.
What? My lord, Daniel, what is that smell? Smells like a fish that's been washed up on the shore for several weeks and has a cancerous odor.
No, that's your wife.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lolita, stop eating that tuna fish sandwich in the cold room. I need some goddamn vinegar down there.
Do you think back then she would have replied with, "But you like my tuna"?
No, they didn't have sex that way back then. Remember? No oral. Missionary.
Right, yeah.
Missionary only, followed by a firm handshake.
Oh, man.
Yeah, the first order of business was to pick a jury. It would consist of 9 farmers, a school teacher, a shipping clerk, and a fruit grower. Which, isn't a fruit grower also a farmer? I didn't understand that. Anyway, so
It must be looked down upon in the community.
all but one belonged to a church in Dayton, and most of the jury had never heard of the theory of evolution.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, it's Western Tennessee in 1925.
We're going to school today, everyone.
Right. So it was a very homogenous jury.
Got your number 2 pencils?
Right. There were no Catholics, no Episcopalians, and no Jews in Dayton, and no woman had ever served on a jury. One member of the jury said that Scopes should be hanged, while another jury...
Oh my gosh.
While another juror thought that there might be something to this Darwin's theory, saying...
He's truly like Darwin Galileo.
Yeah, saying...
Everyone's just like, kill him.
So there was one juror who thought that there was something to this Darwin's theory. He said, "When I was a boy, the Irish potato was called the London lady and was never larger than a hen's egg. They're giants today. The Razorback hog looked like a hound dog. Step beside our current hog, then ask me if I believe in evolution." So this guy gets it. I mean, I just love the fact that he had enough common sense, even though he didn't articulate it well.
I was going to say, the only time I'm ever going to be religious is to pray that I can actually understand what the fuck he just said.
So he's saying the Irish potato when he was a kid
Was
was tiny.
Sounds like James.
Yeah.
But at the end, LSU,
So
LSU, my race car.
He's simply saying that the animals and plants are bigger than they used to be from selective breeding.
Yeah.
So he, as a farmer, that's what I get, because like when you're growing plants or you're raising animals, you're using Darwin's theory to breed out certain. You don't breed the hogs that have bad characteristics, and you do breed the ones that are bigger. So you make. I mean, that's what I don't understand. It's like, how can you not believe in evolution?
Well, I mean, it's to say, all you have to do is look how other people are attracted to, like how people are attracted to others.
Right.
Because no one's attracted to the same person.
Sure.
It is all about, pretty much it could be trickled down to increasing your immune system. Because the thing is, you have a good immune system and other. The good things about it add up into one.
Well, sure. If
So
you
you don't get just one or the other. It morphs.
If you get cancer when
So-
you're 25, you don't typically have 4 or 5 kids, or if you it's just.
But I mean, that's where people like certain smells of other people. Not like cologne or anything, but actual, like almost BO, musk.
Right.
And then,
Pheromones.
pretty much.
Yeah, but it's just funny that this farmer, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense what he's saying. And then the other one's like, hang him! Just. Anyway, so on
Do you think
day.
the farmer looked like the dude from that painting where it's a farmer and his wife?
No, I think
Pitchfork included.
he looks like the guy with the hat and the straw hat on
dude, I bet he
on
looks
Blazing
like-
Saddles. That's what I'm thinking.
I totally morphed into Hell's Rejects.
On day 2, the trial was ready. Tom Stewart, the head of the prosecution, read the indictment against Scopes. Next, it was the defense's turn. The lawyers for the ACLU made a motion for the indictment to be squashed, as the Butler Act violated the Tennessee state constitution, as well as the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Clarence Darrow made an even more compelling argument, stating, "If today you can take a thing like evolution and make it a crime to teach it in the public schools, tomorrow you can make it a crime to teach it in the private schools. And the next year you can make it a crime to teach it in the church. Ignorance and fanaticism are ever busy and always need feeding. Your Honor, it is the setting of man against man and creed against creed, until with flying banners and beating drums we were marching backwards to the 16th century, when bigots lighted faggots to burn men who dared to bring any intelligence and enlightenment and culture to the human mind." And obviously, he meant faggots as in the little twigs, not the little twinks.
Twigs versus Twinks. Next podcast.
Oh, you seem old. I like you. So,
God damn it.
but the prosecution maintained that the Butler Law was constitutional and that the state had the right to require teachers to teach what they were hired to teach. Then Judge Ralston adjourned for the day. On the third day, Judge Ralston again began the day with a prayer, and this time Darrow raised an issue with it. This played in the prosecution's hands, as they wanted to remind the jury that Darrow was a religious skeptic and that his speeches supported modernity, and they would fall on deaf ears. Judge Ralston overruled Darrow, and the prayer stayed. Then on day 4, Judge Ralston officially ruled against the defense's motion to quash the indictment, arguing that the Butler Act did not violate Mr. Scope's religious freedom or personal liberty. And the trial continued with the calling of witnesses. The prosecutors then called on two of Scope's students to the stand, and the students admitted that Scopes taught them Darwin's theory. Of course, the defense already knew this was coming because Darrow had coached the two students on what to say, which seems, this is a weird trial, as you'll see.
Yeah.
The defense was not arguing whether Scopes violated the Butler Act. They were arguing whether this fundamentalist interpretation was shared by all Christians. So Darrow brought 15 witnesses to Dayton, which included both scientists and religious scholars. What Darrow wanted was to give the country a biology lesson and to teach them Darwin's theory. The first witness was a professor of zoology at Johns Hopkins University named Maynard Metcalf, but the prosecution objected, saying Metcalf's testimony was irrelevant to the case. But the judge allowed Metcalf to testify for now and explain the theory of evolution to the jury. So, day 5 was mostly a debate over whether Metcalf's testimony should be allowed in evidence. Darrow opened with some remarks, but then it was William Jennings Bryan's turn to make his argument, stating, "Your Honor, it isn't proper to bring experts in here to try to defend the purpose of the people of the state by showing the state that this thing that they denounce and outlaw is a beautiful thing that everybody ought to believe in." Does he not sound like Trump? In that he's so vague. We don't need no experts coming in here and
Yeah,
tell.
but with a lot less bigotry and profanity.
Right, exactly.
At least he didn't say like, what did Trump say?
Oh, what didn't he say?
Well, I mean, like, extremely misogynist. Okay, that doesn't help. But
My favorite is the
grab her by the pussy.
Yeah,
Or whatever it was.
No, the Mexicans are coming. They're not bringing their best. They're bringing their rapists.
Right?
Yeah, in some ways, super good people. That's how he started.
When have you ever seen rapists want to work? Just gonna say that. Like, they don't even work. They don't even work to get laid.
Yeah.
Why do you think they're gonna work for a paycheck like everyone else?
Yeah. I just.
Drug dealers, they don't
Again.
take our jobs.
Yeah.
They ain't gonna come here.
Right. I could do another podcast on just that.
Oh, yeah. It'll just be ranting.
Right. People in the audience called out, "Amen," and yes, when Brian finished speaking. People in the courtroom had tears in their eyes. They got out of their seats and thanked him for speaking for them.
Dude, they should have just done that trial under church. It ain't going nowhere.
No, then one of Scope's ACLU attorneys, Dudley Moore, rose to address the court and make this statement. "Your Honor, Mr. Bryan is not the only one who believes. He's not the only one who believes in God. He's not the only one who believes in the Bible. Keep your Bible. Keep it as your consolation. Keep it as your guide. But keep it where it belongs, in the world of your own conscience, in the world of your individual judgment. And do not try to tell an intelligent world and the intelligence of this country that these books written by men who knew none of the accepted fundamental facts of science can be put into a course of science. Because what are they doing here? We have just had a war with 20 million dead. Civilization is not so proud of the work of the adults. Civilization need not be so proud of what the grown-ups have done. For God's sakes, let the children have their minds kept open. Close no doors to their knowledge. Shut no doors from them. Make the distinction between theology and science. Let them have both." The courtroom exploded with enthusiasm, even more than they have of Brian. One policeman got so excited and so caught up in the excitement from the crowd, he was there to control. He pounded the table with his nightstick so hard, he split the top of the table. Just fucking lost
Dude,
it.
that's fucking amazing.
Yeah, so then came day 6 of the trial where Judge Ralston would make his decision. Ralston was a modernist who believed in evolution, but he had also had to get elected in Western Tennessee and didn't want to anger his constituents. So guess what happened? He decided to throw out the testimony of Dr. Metcalf, and he refused to call any of the other witnesses that Darrow had brought to Dayton. He said the testimony was irrelevant because the trial was not about evolution or creationism. It was about whether Scopes had violated the Butler Act. Darrow was fucking furious and became angry at the judge for blindly siding with the prosecution. It got so out of hand that the judge threatened to charge Darrow with contempt of court. Because of this ruling, Darrow's defense argument was destroyed. He had no witnesses to call, and he would not be able to have the great debate that he had looked forward to. The trial appeared to be over, but it wasn't. The seventh day of the trial was expected to be uneventful. Judge Ralston decided to move the trial outside due to the oppressive heat, and everyone expected the trial to wrap up. But then Darrow did something unthinkable. He asked to call an additional witness to the stand. William Jennings Bryan.
Why does this sound familiar?
He's the prosecution attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy he's...
Yeah.
Needless to say, this surprised everyone, especially the other prosecuting attorneys who loudly objected. This is pretty much unthinkable. This only happens in movies.
Yep.
You do not, as a defense attorney, no one calls the prosecuting attorney to the stand as a witness. But again, like I said, this is a weird trial. The other prosecuting attorneys loudly objected and thought it was irrelevant, but not Bryan. Bryan agreed to testify, much to the other prosecutor's chagrin. He said it would be an honor to defend the Bible against Darrow. Now Darrow had the debate that he wanted. Darrow started off his questioning in a friendly manner, asking him benign questions about the Bible and his faith. Then he asked Bryan if he believed the Bible literally. Yes, Bryan said. I believe everything in the Bible should be accepted as it is given. Some of the Bible is given illustratively. Then Darrow asked him if Jonah actually swallowed a whale. Then he asked him if Eve really came from Adam's rib. He asked about the Great Flood. Bryan had trouble answering. He then asked Bryan if he believed the earth was created in 6 literal days. At this point, Bryan was flustered and angry and tired and said, "Not 6 days or 24 hours, no." This astonished the crowd, as Bryan had essentially admitted that he didn't believe the literal creation story. Bryan became furious and he yelled, "You only want to cast ridicule on everyone who believes in the Bible." Darrow said, "We have the purpose of preventing bigots and ignoramuses from controlling the education of the United States, and you know it, and that is all." Bryan went into a rage, and he lashed out at Darrow. He shook his fist at him and said, "I'm simply trying to protect the word of God against the greatest atheist in the United States." And with that, the court was adjourned for the day.
And see, that reminds me, one of my favorite teachers I've ever had was my world history teacher.
Yeah.
And he actually made us learn and work. We would fill out at least like 4 to 5 pages of notes a day in an hour and a half class. But one time he talked about religion. Only time he ever said anything. And his belief was creationism and evolutionism. We were talking about that, and he goes, "What I believe is God is real. 6 days, the way you think of it, is not how it is in the Bible." He's
Right.
like, "I truly believe 6 days in the Bible were actual years and millennia." He's like, "I believe in evolutionism. I believe in starting there and then getting to Adam and Eve." But he's like, "But as someone who believes in history, science, and religion, I cannot tell you that Adam and Eve were the first ones."
Right. Even there's a few scientists who do believe in God and are religious, but most of them, even them, they don't accept. They even say you have to, as a scientist, you can't not accept evolution.
Yeah.
Because it's a valid scientific theory. So, on the 8th and last day of the trial, July 21st, 1925, Judge Ralston expunged Bryan's testimony of the previous day. He ruled Bryan's testimony was irrelevant, and with no more witnesses, Darrow rested his case. Now it's up to the jury. So the members of the jury, who expected to have front row seats, ended up spending most of the trial on the lawn of the courthouse. They were barred from the courtroom so that they wouldn't hear any testimony that Judge Ralston deemed irrelevant. But Ralston had forgotten that there were loudspeakers set up outside covering the trial, so the jury heard everything.
Yes. Oh my, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's fucking stupid. So the jury deliberated for 10 minutes and found John Scopes guilty of violating the Butler Act. And with that, Judge Ralston fined him the minimum of $100. But after the trial, the ACLU immediately filed an appeal to go before the Tennessee Supreme Court. This is what they wanted. They wanted to bring it to the Supreme Court and have it overturned. But they never got a chance to take the case further because the conviction was thrown out on a technicality. Judge Ralston had fined Scopes $100, but in the state of Tennessee, any fine of more than $50 has to be levied by a jury and not a judge. So in the end, the Scopes trial had no winner. So the judge just
He fucked up.
He fucked up massively. Both ends. The jury heard everything. He pissed off everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just.
If he would have just stood by his beliefs instead of trying to please
Right.
one group, he wouldn't have pissed off everyone.
He pissed off everyone. So, but it did have one big loser, as William Jennings Bryan died in his sleep just 5 days after the trial ended.
Holy shit.
Yeah. It's just. He was 65 years old, and his sudden death was attributed to untreated diabetes. So I guess he had diabetes and didn't know about it, and like the stress killed him. So I don't think God liked his performance. That was shit, William. That was just shit.
Jesus.
So Dayton was ridiculed in the national news and was now a laughingstock throughout the country. Other states were now leery of passing a law like this, and only 2 other states, Arkansas and Mississippi, passed anti-evolution laws because they're fucking immune from
The rest of the world?
from criticism.
Yeah. Well, they're not immune to it. They just live with so much of it. They don't
Yeah,
give a shit.
I can understand why Bill Clinton wanted to get out. I get it. So these were eventually overturned by the Supreme Court in 1968. Lately, the tactics of Christian conservatives has changed. Instead of banning the teaching of evolution, they have been homeschooling their children. They have been encouraging the teaching of intelligent design, and they have been calling evolution, air quotes, just a theory. Yeah. You know.
Hey, stepping stones, dude.
Right. So that's a topic for a future podcast.
Right on.
So, what'd you think? Did you know anything about that trial?
No, not at all.
Yeah, it's at the time it was considered the trial of the century.
It makes sense that it existed, but never would have fucking thought about it.
So, if anyone's listening and they've ever heard of the play or the movie Inherit the Wind, it is based on this trial, but it's not. Okay. The movie has Spencer Tracy in it and Harry Morgan, who played the Colonel Potter on MASH, but this is before MASH. But he plays the judge, and Spencer Tracy plays Clarence Darrow.
I can just see it being religious, like 12 Angry Men.
It's kind of in that setup, but it's an allegory for McCarthyism because it was made in 1960. And it's a really good movie if no one's ever seen it. And it's
a little bit more realistic than
very
than the Crucible.
Yes,
because the Crucible is pretty much McCarthyism.
It is McCarthyism.
Fantastic.
But this was Inherit the Wind is a very good book and play if anybody wants to see it. And it is based on this trial with a slight tilt to it. But it's an interesting story, right? It's and you know this happened 93 years ago. We're still dealing with this.
Oh yeah,
it's crazy, and it doesn't seem like Tennessee's changed much. Yep.
Not at all.
And then unfortunate.
Well, it's changed more than Arkansas and Mississippi.
We'll see. November, Tennessee has a Senate race coming up. We'll see how that goes.
I can't even call it the butt crack of America because it's
not
even that good. It's the fucking taint of America.
That was Jackson, Mississippi is the butt crack of America. Or Joplin, Missouri is another one. Pretty bad place.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you're living in Joplin, Missouri, I'm sorry you live in a shitty town. And that was shit you didn't know. I hope everyone was entertained and learned something. It's one of the most famous trials of the 20th century. And if you didn't know about it, then, maybe that's on you. How about that?
And no matter where you stand on religious belief, this is actually really interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I'm pretty sure if anyone has listened to us to this episode, I doubt they lean towards more fanatical side. But
You never know.
know.
If you are a person that believes in creationism, I still like, I'd like to hear your thoughts. I'd be interested in,
We won't judge you until you start talking.
And with that, I'm Corey.
I'm Logan.
And that was shit you didn't know. Like and subscribe, please.